Cheers, everybody. I will be speaking in English, so if you don't understand English, you will need your headphones on. It's good to hear so much happiness in the room, and I hope that I will give you happiness with my speech. There is one thing we need to celebrate immediately, and that is the Employment Tribunal in England has ruled that Uber drivers are workers, and they should be given social protection, working time, and minimum wage accordingly. This is brilliant. So I've just been contacted by the Financial Times wanting UNI to give some comments, because UNI is well known now for our work in making sure that the gig economy workers are not exploited anymore. So listen, we are going to have a little bit of a speed dating on digitalization the next 20 minutes. And already now to the interpreters, I apologize if I speed talk, but I will have to do so. Listen, we're going to talk about four main things here, and one of them is the urgency of now. And with that, I mean that everybody in this room and our colleagues, our brothers and sisters across the world, we must act now in this whole field of digitalization. I'm going to talk about the disruption that we know is ahead of us. And then one thing that is becoming very clear, that UNI, with you, have an important role, and that is workplace data, workers' data, and then finally, what to do about all of this. Now, the urgency of now. We have a moment in time in history where we can set the frames for the world and the future ahead of us, for the generations who follow us. We probably have 2 or 3 years to get this right, without exaggeration. I think we must understand that when nothing is for sure, everything is possible. And with that, I mean that digitally, technologically, everything we can imagine that can be made, and even that we can't imagine can be made. For the extreme changes to our societies, everything will be possible, and therefore nothing is for sure. Everything that we know of, everything that we have fought for generations as unions, can be thrown up in the air and lost if we do not act now. Now, what is all of this digitalization? I think just let me spend a couple of minutes on putting this into the correct and probably complex picture. Now, digitalization, the technological changes, artificial intelligence, all of that we hear about, robots, which sounds like science fiction, is just one major change out of a bunch of major changes that are happening. The economic shift in power from the west to the east. China. Think of China. China has brought up most of Africa's raw materials. China has bought a lot of the infrastructure around the world in America. China even owns a third of a nuclear power plant in England. China is the only massive economy that is driving a demand-side economy. Their buying power far exceeds any other regions in the world. That's just one. Climate change. People who deny climate change are doing us all, and our children and our grandchildren, a disjustice. Climate change is so real. Climate change deniers have no place in our societies. The demographic changes ahead of us. Across the whole world, the populations are getting older and older. At the moment, there's 4 working people for every pensioner. In just 10 years, there will only be 2. This begs the question, how are we going to fund our welfare state? Who is going to take care of the elderly? In Europe alone, in 2 years, there's going to be a deficit of 1.5 million care workers. How do we as unions make sure that care is not only for those who can afford it? So these many changes are happening right now, giving us a complex task, a complex time in history. But if anybody can change this, it is us. Now, let's go into the digitalization part. Data, artificial intelligence, robotics. Now, put your hands up, those in you who still feel that all of this is a little bit science fiction-y. Come on, be honest. I do. Ah, there we go. There's a few honest people in the room. I work on this 24 hours a day. I travel around the world and work on this. And it still seems to me almost scary what is happening. I think we must never, ever rest back and say that this is an industrial change like there has been industrial change throughout history. Yes, this is an industrial change, but it's not just affecting one small sector or one isolated sector in our economies. It's going to affect all of us, from the cleaners to the IT engineers, to the commerce workers, to the taxi drivers. It is going to affect all of us. UNI has pointed at two main drivers of this current change: data and AI. Now, data is probably the biggest gift we are giving away without really knowing we're doing it. Now, just think of your data trail on a daily basis, from your Google searches to your mobile phones, to the customer call services you do, and every conversation you hear when you phone the bank. This conversation might be recorded for educational purposes. That is one fat lie. The conversation is recorded for the data it gives you. The data that you leave in your doctor, in your health file, in the GPS that you use to find here, those of you who drove here. We are leaving data behind us all the time, in the online as well as in the offline economy. Now, just think of your Facebook profiles, or those of you on Twitter. Those on Facebook, you've probably noticed you're getting advertisements that, funnily enough, are about T-shirts from the university you went to, or the town that you were born in. All of that is built on the data that you are giving Facebook. I think one of our biggest fallacies in the current times is that we have come to believe there is something called a free lunch. We believe that we have the right to Facebook for free, Google Search for free, Google Translate for free, and Twitter for free. But what we are giving them is our invaluable data. Now, data has been termed by even the economists the new gold. Just look at this. Alec Rosso, leading researcher, he estimates that in 2 years, 15 to 20% of the world's combined GDP will be on data flows. 15 to 20%. Nothing has had that importance in the worldwide economy before. And then we can also ask the question, but that's great. If we all own it, we will all benefit from this. But who owns it? Now, this has taken me several months of really hard work, and I am a doctor, I'm used to a bit of research, to find out who owns the data. Now, nobody could give me an exact figure, but the CEO of LinkedIn gave me the most probably truthful approximate, and that is that very few companies do. And 10 points to those in the room who can guess who. Big tech. Amazon, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, and Apple. They earn around 80% of the world's combined data. And they own that through their supply chains and through so-called data brokers. Now, this is putting these 5 companies in an extreme position of power. You might have followed in the press that there's a lot of talk now in the United States and elsewhere about the power of big tech. Have they got too big? Well, the quick and easy answer is yes. They can take the biggest brains in artificial intelligence and give them lots of money to work for them. They have the data that is now manipulating our news feeds, fake news. They have the data that suddenly will make our insurances no longer in a collective insurance, but will be tailor-made to the individual. I bet I was going to swear there, but I won't. that in 10 years, there will no longer be a health insurance with the same price for every single one of us. The pricing will be measured against the norm. Christina, you are obese. Your health insurance will go up. Oh, you incidentally also have a health file. It will go up even more. We will be measured against the norm. And if you believe this is science fiction, let's take a look at China again. They have something called the social contract. In that, they award their citizens points after how the citizens act. Do they have a job? Do their children go to school? Do their children pass school in the nominated time? If they work a little bit more, they earn more points. If they are ill, they are deducted in points. This is the most extreme behavior manipulation ever. And we will receive that very soon, I bet you, in our insurance world. Now, the value of data. For those in the back of the room, I'm not sure you can see this, but otherwise I will tell you. This table here shows you what the big tech earns every 10 seconds on your data. Now, look in the top corner there. Apple, 11,740 US dollars every 10 seconds. Whilst I've been looking at that, a bit flabbergasted, most of you, they've just earned 11,000 US dollars more. There's no doubt about the value of this data. So how does this data actually affect our workplaces? Well, everything called artificial intelligence is built on data. Data sets that they take about you and I. I was offered on Twitter the other day, if I paid 1,000 US dollars, I could get any data and all available data about anybody I wanted to for 1,000 US dollars. If you don't believe this is actually plausible, here's a real-life example. I used to live in Belgium and I wanted to get a mortgage. Now, I have a good wage and I had a bit of savings. I went into the bank and thought 3 seconds afterwards she'll give me a rough figure of what kind of a mortgage I could get. And she was typing away and kept on typing, and then pushed back from the desk and said, "Sorry, Christina, we can't offer you a mortgage." I went, "What?" And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Your health file." Now, it is illegal in Europe to share this information, but the bank had got that information. And I was obviously too much of a risk to give a mortgage. Now, of course, I did not just walk out of there quietly. But anyway, AI and all of these data sets, the robots, your fridges who send you messages soon saying, "Christina, you are low on milk. Do you want me to order some from Meagle?" This is now artificial intelligence. The robots who perform surgery in hospitals. All of that is built on artificial intelligence, and all of that will disrupt our jobs. If you deny that, you are in the same boat as the climate change deniers. The OECD predicts here, on average, the jobs that exist today which will be accessible to automation. 57% of all current jobs today can be automated, i.e. replaced by robots and artificial intelligence. 57%. But look at some of the other figures there. Ethiopia, 85%. China, 77%. We're not talking about a small isolated part of our economies here. But, and I have to say a but, UNI is of the firm belief that these figures are exaggerated. What we will probably be witnessing more and more, and some of you maybe already, is that certain tasks that constitute our jobs will be replaced or facilitated by artificial intelligence. Think of the doctors. When they're looking at X-ray photos, suddenly they'll have a worldwide database of cancer cells, so they'll be able to see very quickly, is this cell a cancer cell, or is it, God forbid, and let's hope no, God hope so, not. We will be able to have lawyers who will be able to check case files very quickly and compare worldwide very quickly. In our world, in the services world, we'll be able to draw on lots of prior information to be able to offer a certain product or service to a customer. But of course, that will mean that we will have to do something else. So the whole reskilling, and to those of our colleagues who will lose their jobs, Deutsche Bank was out this morning saying they're going to cut now 9,000 jobs more because of digitalization. So there will be a lot of job losses, and there's going to be a hell of a lot of job changes. Now, I have, I don't know how many letters after my name, a bachelor, a master, a PhD, and all of these things. And the other day, a professor looked at me and said, but Christina, you don't think this is enough for the rest of your working life. You will need to re-educate yourself not once, but twice. So this whole question of reskilling and upskilling is very important. What we are also seeing is an increasing individualization of work across the world. And what do I mean by that? Well, the bogus self-employment. The gig economy is the master of this. Platforms who say we are nothing but intermediaries. We are marketplaces that combine people who want to work with those who want work done. They are creating a whole new class of people who are disenfranchised, who have very little, if any, social rights, who do not even have the fundamental right that they can organize, where unions are told stay away because if you help these people bargain around their price, you are de facto creating cartels. And anti-competition law forbids that. So we are pushing in the whole world, we're seeing the only employment form on the rise is that of the bogus self-employed. This is a serious matter. The tribunal ruling today in England is a positive step forward. We see small enclaves of these rulings all over the world, and we must continue to push for the notion that work is work. ILO conventions apply to all forms of work. We must never let anybody say we cannot organize workers. We must and we should. Zooming on, because I feel that my 20 minutes are soon slipping up. Augmented reality. This is another concept you will hear more and more, and this is us hand in hand with the robots. This is something we will have to get used to. How do we work with the new technologies? And how do we make sure that it always is the humans who are in command? You might hear debates right now about whether robots should be given a liability, whether they should be liable, the Tesla car, if it kills a person, the self-driving car, and the truck, and so on. We must never, ever give a human attribute to a machine. Please remember that. It is the owner of the Tesla car, it is the owner of the self-driving truck, it is the owner of the robot who is liable. What are we going to do? Sue a robot? No. We must always make sure it is the humans who are in command. Now, I want to spend a few minutes, and please, President, if I have them, let me give, how many minutes do I have left? 20? Great, thank you. That's so generous. That's very nice. Now, workplace data, my friends, this is actually something where UNI really has broken through, because there are no laws around the world that protect specifically workers' data. The data that is mined on us as we work. For those who work in a bank and are told, well, it takes 10 seconds or 20 seconds or 2 minutes to sell a product to a client, you are monitored continuously. For the home care workers, their whole route is mapped out. They know that it takes 6 minutes to shower Mrs. Smith. Why did you spend 15? We are monitored constantly at work. Some even now have to leave their fingerprints to get into work, or they have to scan their eyes, or, as the newest technology actually measures your emotional state when you walk into work. Now, this data, we have no rights over that. Even within the EU, the up-and-coming General Data Protection Regulation kind of hints that it also implies to workers. But the whole chapter on workers was removed just before it got signed. So there's no laws, there's no regulation that protects us workers. Now, just have a look at this. This is recent news articles about the role of data in human resources. I love the title down the bottom there. Does big data take the human out of human resources? Now, what is happening is increasingly companies are using data to inform management of who should get hired, who should get fired, who should get promoted. Now, listen up. If we do not have right of access to the data they use to inform these decisions, then we will forever lose power in the companies. Can you just imagine if you were working there as a shop steward and there's a bunch of people who stand actually for promotion, but 10 of them are denied and 1 is given. And the management said, yes, but the data informs that Mr. Smith, he should have the promotion. I'm sorry to use a man, but it's usually a man. If we do not know why I was rejected, was it because of my health file? Was it because I am obese? Was it because that I took Mrs. Smith into the shower for 15 minutes because she desperately needed it that day? We must have the right of access to this data, and we must have the right of explanation. No law governs that. And UNI is now and will make public next week a set of standards for this. And of course, you will receive all of that and hopefully find it useful. So we are mined at work on our personal identifiable information, on our biometric data, and our workflow monitoring. It is used in these processes, and it will be used more and more to exert power on us. Again, if we don't get access to how the data is used, what data is used, how are we ever going to check for anti-discriminative or discriminative behaviour? How are we ever going to check if management is building their decisions on ethical considerations? We can't, and therefore we must act now. Now, this book, if any of you like reading, get this book. It is absolutely amazing. It's very well written, easily written by women who used to program the algorithms and the data that is now subjecting all of us to a hidden force. Now, I want to give you one example from this book. So this is a real-life example. There was a little state in America whose schools were underperforming. So the state governor called in a consultancy company and said, help me find out why, and let's do something about it. To cut a long story short, from one day to the next, after some months, 181 teachers lost their jobs. They didn't get an explanation as to why, apart from that they obviously were underperforming. One of the teachers who got fired had otherwise been a very well-known, praised and appreciated teacher. The kids loved her, the parents loved her year after year, but she got fired. Now, she was a fighter. She didn't want to give up without knowing why, and she found out that the data they had used was so simple. They had compared the children's grades from the year before to the current year, and she was fired because her children's grades had fallen. What they didn't check was it the same children they were measuring? It wasn't. That year she had received 30% new children from another school. That school had falsely kept the grades high to remain good in the statistics. So they came to her school, she graded them according to their skills, and she got fired. This is how data can be misused, and this is why we must have the right of explanation. So, I'm going to end here on a few words. What shall we do about this? Now, we must make sure that there's a level balance of power in our companies. As our companies become more and more digital, we must have access to those digital tools. We must also look at ourselves and say, are we as unions digital enough? I would desperately like 5 big consultants to come and look at UNI Global Union for a week and then suggest to us how we could use these tools that we can't even imagine exist. But is this a way to appeal to the young? Now, as I look across this room, I don't see many people under the age of 35. We must engage with the young people. We must ask them how they use the technology and how we, as unions, can appeal to them through the use of technology. But we must also ask this fundamental question: what society do we want? I think I understood that the professor earlier today was talking about the universal basic income. Am I correct? Now, God forbid that we ever get to a situation where we need that. We must fight for the employability of our colleagues. We must fight for the right to work. I do not only work to earn money. I work for social fulfillment. I work to have friends, to have a social life, to feel inspired and be inspired. Now, a universal basic income in its worst form will isolate us. So we must fight for the employability. I do not want a society where robots do all of the work that we otherwise could do. I mean, because honestly, if there's any economist in this room, who is going to buy all these products and services if we are all on an equal wage? How will inflation go up if everybody's paid the same? And it won't be everybody, by the way. There will be a very core group of very rich people. Now, just look at what's happening with Brexit and Trump to find out what is happening in the countries where the social cohesion is dropping. We must fight for social cohesion, and we must fight for the employability of our workers. Thank you. And I won't go through this list, and you will receive all of this from UNI at some point in the near future. But another thing, as I said before, work is work, regardless of how we do that work. In the future, the labour market is going to be far more fluid. We'll be working for 5 platforms at one time, and then part-time job, and then a full-time job, and we'll be shifting in and out. Now, that fluidity must be matched by a fluidity in our social protection. Our social protection systems were built after the Second World War in a reality that no longer is. All work of all kinds should contribute to our right to social protection. We must not accept these people who are bogus self-employed are left with no rights. Everybody should have the same social and fundamental rights. And everybody should have access to lifelong learning. Now, just to give you a little story, I know I'm reaching the end. A little story, I gave a speech at Google recently. Now, Google have only just now opened their doors to the union movement, and it's quite interesting, really, because I usually say I'm breaking down myths every time I see Google, because they have an idea of unions, and they're finding out that their idea is very wrong. But the whole day was about digital skills. And you can just imagine this Google headquarters, very fancy, all these tech CEOs talking about the mismatch between the skills available and the skills they need. And then I was given the floor, the last speaker of the day, Christina Colclough, UNI Global Union. Ugh, I heard. So I took that and I said, excuse me, but you who sighed there, I said, please tell me after I have spoken whether you still sigh. And he went, ugh. So I said to them, how many of you offer apprenticeship schemes? None of them did. How many of you offer elaborate educational and training schemes? None of them did. So I said to them, how dare you complain about a mismatch between the skills available and the skills you need when you don't contribute to that? And we ended up in a really good discussion about how our education systems might have to change, how we have to rethink the notion of university degrees, how every company must take responsibility and train and retrain our workers. So the last comment I want to give is about the supply chain responsibility. There's a lot of work going on now about businesses and their due diligence and so on. The world is becoming one complex web of supply chains, but with very, very few companies on the very top. Those few companies are the 5 big tech. And if we take China's Alibaba, that makes 6. We must demand that good jobs, decent jobs, are all the way through the supply chain, all the way down to the gig economy workers. Everybody has a right to decent work. Now, as I mentioned, we have 2 documents coming out. These are my phony front pages. We actually have a designer who's putting some nicer front pages on them. But these two documents will be published next week. They will give you very operational principles for workers' data rights, something you can put into your collective agreements, into your company alliances, and really work on this. And the same with our call for ethical artificial intelligence. We really need to do this remembering that there is a desperate urgency of now. And with that, thank you very much.